Hey, everybody. Welcome to Game Audio Hour number 143, a weekly podcast. We discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences, to audio secrets. Here's where you find your in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. Mike!
Well, I wasn't ready for the question.
I went right to you because I saw your T.
I'm doing great.
How are you, dude?
Asked, right?
Yes.
It's been too long since I've been on the show, so I'm glad to be back.
Oh, we're glad to have you back, but you've been busy, which is good.
Beats the alternative.
I got to take this thing off. I can only hear you guys, not me. Chase, how are you?
Doing pretty well. Finally getting caught up on everything, wrapping up some projects, looking for new ones, the usual.
You know, you've got the perfect studio background with that beadboard back there. All the old studios from the 70s.
It's like only one.
Is that it? That's just one panel of beadboard?
No. It's kind of actually around the entire room.
There you go. So that's a control room. I was just watching an online tour of a studio. I'm not going to think of it. And I was just so happy to see beadboard everywhere because it's just the old kind of like classic 70s look for a control room.
Soon I'll be able to afford hooks and then put up pictures and frames, but you know,
I think
start from the beginning.
I think it was meant to be like a Helmholtz diffuser kind of idea. Trying to get that halo.
It is pretty dead in here.
Is it?
Yeah.
That works surprisingly well at Helmholtz. You know, you just are Helmholtz. I might be well, since it's a beadboard full of holes. I want to go with Helmholtz. And
this from the man who went to study music technology in Germany for 4 years.
Well, kind of, yeah.
You think they would have taught you how to pronounce Helmholtz?
Yeah, I don't know. I was actually studying something different, and then I went into the recording because what I was studying didn't last the whole time. So I only got half an education. Therefore, I got the helm part right, and the holes is the other. That's a sad excuse. So
bookmark that subject for later, because I think we're going to be returning back to the subject of music education.
Hey, I think that's a good idea. So I'm broadcasting from a different room because I moved my recording console into my control room, which is behind me. You normally see that room there that's red. But I'm out here, so it's a bit of a hodgepodge. I'm on a laptop with these headphones, which we should talk about someday, these blue headphones. And it doesn't look very nice out here right now because I moved everything. I switched. Anyway, cables all over the floor, you can see. Can you see that? You can't see that, can you? Yeah, wait, cables anywhere? No, you can't tell. Never mind. False alarm. The cables do. If you sing into one end of a cable, you can hear it on the other end of a cable. It's like classic telephone. That's what audio technology was built on, was the old tin can telephone game. True statement.
Love it. True story.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about a subject. Which one do you guys want to start with? Do you want to? Hey, let's just go off on what instrument do you own, or not even own. You don't have to own. Chatty's getting on this too because we'd love to hear. What instrument did you write the most music on? Now that can be a keyboard or a piano or a guitar or something. You know, some people might say it's a computer keyboard and a piece of software, but what instrument, we'll start with you, Mike, have you written the most music that you've written in your life upon or on?
So what you're asking is like, what input device have I used the most? You're not asking what instrument did I write for? You're saying like what?
Right. Because some people are piano players, but they wrote guitar parts on a piano, or a guitarist who wrote a song that later got produced for piano was written on a guitar because that guitar was their main instrument for writing on.
All right. I mean, you want a specific thing, not like a generic category like a keyboard.
Right.
The particular thing.
The particular thing.
I have a Yamaha stage digital piano. I forget the model number, but I think it's mostly kind of a gigging digital piano. So the control panel is simplified, and I bought it years ago because I needed a controller and I really liked the tone. And I think of all my surviving instruments, that's the one that I've used as an input device most often. Right now, I do have a Nectar, the 88 version of their keyboard, but that's a fairly recent addition to the studio, so it's not going to bracket points for having been with me the longest. So I think this Yamaha digital piano, which currently has a big piece of plywood on an angle. So it's my scoring station for acoustic scoring. Like I'm doing it old school with a giant scoring pad and pencil. I'll kind of prop it up there, and that's the piano I'm hunching over when I'm working. But it's also looped into MIDI, so I'll use it as a MIDI controller as well.
Nice. So you've been writing on it and using it since you've owned it.
Yeah, it's probably been over a decade, possibly 15 years.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Chase, what do you got?
Well, it used to be upright piano for about 4 or 5 years, and then I moved, and it wasn't my piano, so I couldn't take it.
Oh.
But the controller that I bought is an Axiom 61 controller that I bought in 2000, and I was very happy to have that. And only the B6 key does not work on it now, so everything else is okay. And I could just use the octave button up and down, and I think that's where I write the most of my music. And when I started out, it was my alto saxophone. I was just writing letters.
Nice. But which has produced the most music for you? Would that be the piano that you don't have any longer?
Probably the Axiom.
Is it?
Because I've had it the longest. Yeah.
That's great, man. That's fantastic. And so, if it's a controller, then what software would you credit with using the most often?
Well, I haven't reached. Wait, did I reach? No, I haven't reached 10 years of Cubase, so it would be Fruity Loops still.
Gotcha. And the internal instruments there.
Yeah, until I realized that you could have plugins. Like, where was I for like 3 or 4 years and samples, and I didn't know. So I was struggling with those sounds and trying to make them sound good, and it was.
Well, that's a good exercise though, because if you limit yourselves, as we've discussed on the show, you really come quite far. And Mike,
true, I did.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chase.
I was just gonna say I did eventually transcend something good out of it, but that took 4 years.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. That's faster than me. So, Mike, if you do go controller, is it a DAW that's the software you've used the most, or do you use like a third-party software?
Sorry, Kyle, I'm following up on your last question because I'm a pack rat and I keep every manual digitally of everything I've ever owned. I just want to find out what digital piano am I using, and it's the Yamaha P120. I don't necessarily recommend it, but that's what I have. All right, so you're now asking which DAW?
When it's in controller mode. I guess I'm imagining that you don't write solely 100% of the time off the sounds that are in the Yamaha, that you will switch over to use some software and use the Yamaha as a controller. So maybe this is second place item for the software that you've used the most often, or you've written the most pieces of music using. Terrible.
Well, first of all, I never use the internal sounds in that Yamaha. I used to years ago, but it's just not as good a digital piano as modern plugins. The keyboard has a very nice action, which I like a lot. So it's just a kind of a mule doing the carrying of the data. So are you asking which DAW do I use the most, or which
software?
But like by software, do you mean soundware or
Well, that's up to you. It's which software you've written the most pieces of music on. That could be a third-party software. It could be just Contact.
Okay, well, I mean, I feel like I have to say Logic since I've been using it since version 2.6, which might be older than some of our listeners. Gotcha. And that was before Apple bought it. It was just eMagic back then. And yeah, I've been using that. I started using Performer a long time ago, and then I said, this sucks. And I was working for a composer named Michel Colombier, who's a great guy, and he was European, and he was using this crazy European software called Logic that I'd never heard of, and he persuaded me to check it out, and I was a convert.
Nice. Were you a full convert on software and hardware with eMagic?
I never used their audio interface. No. I was aware of it, but no, didn't need it.
I desired very much, what was it called, the Unitor 8?
Yeah, the Unitor.
Yeah, I never ended up buying one. That's interesting. Well, you were saying about Yamaha's action. I have a S90ES right there. And that's the keyboard that I write the most on, but I'm not a piano player, so I should say that's the keyboard that I stumble over quite often.
Are you going to show it to us or just leave it to our imagination?
Oh, you've seen an S90 ES. No, there's no light back there.
Yeah.
I'll send a Google link or something. It's a really great piece of equipment. But the thing I was going to say is because it's not the one I've written the most on. If I've written the most on anything, it is this guy, my 58 Stratocaster. I'll show you that with all its beat up neck. Look at this thing. Look at all the marks. It's like, this is an education for how to play the blues, because it's, you know, and how to use pentatonic box patterns, because it's all like, you can see this is the bar, and then this is the bendy area, and then this is the bendy area for the higher notes. Isn't that funny? It's been used so long.
A guitar that has seen a lot of care and loving use.
It has. I absolutely love this guitar. I don't want to make it a show about the guitar, but I did the paint job. Look at that flat black, looks beautiful. It used to be this like seafoam green or something, which was the first year it came out. You can see the paint still in here a little bit. And then I brassed everything for sustain and fully sprung it and got some belt rash. But I did the neck too with the pickups and everything, and that was back in the 80s, and it's never needed it ever since. I've been real proud of the work. Still got the original pickups on it. It's even got the original knobs. You can see they're like yellowed. You see all this yellowing. It's a new pick guard, and I put a MIDI pickup on it because I'm never going to sell this thing. But anyway, that's the instrument that I've written the most stuff on.
It's got a lot of memories.
I'm not saying it's good stuff, just saying it's stuff. In some ways, in the internal lives of Fender Stratocasters, mine is a tortured one, because it's really old, was meant for some amazing rocker, got stuck with me, and I've written shit on it. So it gets made fun of on the playground at the Fender Strat old school playground, where the other ones, you know, who come from like, you know, Steve Vai or something, get to say, hey, look at this amazing thing that has been heard by millions of people. My Strat goes, yeah, I got stuck with that guy. But anyway, that keyboard, the Yamaha, has fantastic action. And the only reason I bought it is because of that mic. So I find it interesting that you said the action was really good on your Yamaha. I went around, I tried the Rolands, I tried everybody that had a weighted keyboard, and I wanted 88 keys. And this is the one I kept going back to, not because of the sounds. This is pre-motif, like right before the motif came out. So it's got some motif, but not a bunch. And well, maybe a bunch. What do I know? I don't own a motif. But anyway, it plays great. I mean, that makes a big difference, doesn't it?
I would say so. And I'm very fussy about key resistance, and as I've gone on in past shows, about the height of the keys. So there are all these ergonomic factors that I look for in a keyboard controller that have nothing to do with the fact that it may also produce sound itself.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna, if I will take your topic and spin it into a slightly different but related topic. We're talking about now abstractly the way we input music, the way we physically produce it. So one form of that question is, what piece of physical music hardware do you use to send MIDI data or whatever to the place it's going to go to get recorded? But there are a couple of different ways to generate music. You can bang it out on an instrument, guitar, keyboard, and kind of improvise and then develop it that way. If you're someone like Alex, where your brain is connected to the mathematical structure of the universe, you stare at a number of rows of MIDI data, like that guy watching The Matrix in the first Matrix movie, and just you see, that's his medium of interfacing with music, and somehow he can translate that in musical terms. But a third way, and this is kind of the classical approach to composition, is to hear the music in your head first and foremost, and to manipulate it in your imagination, and then to try to translate that into mechanical form through data entry somehow. So my question for you two is, how often do you hear a melody or maybe a rhythmic groove or harmonic progression in your head? You're perhaps waiting in the doctor's office and suddenly this thing comes to you and you kind of have to hum it to yourself, or maybe you pull out your iPhone and record it. But how often, if ever, is that the start of your compositional process?
Chase, you're first.
This is my best friend. Growing up, it was my tape recorder. I actually just finished dumping last Monday. I think about 40 themes that I've come up with either through my dream or, like you said, it's a really good start, and I can't.
Shoot, we're losing you, Chase.
When I'm getting an idea.
I had a lot of cutout, Chase. I think we missed most of what you were saying. Are you still with us?
It's usually for me.
Can you hear me okay, Mike?
You're coming through loud and clear. We're having some Chase problems.
Yeah, I'm Chase. Yeah.
We have to chase Chase's audio.
You beat me to the joke.
I know.
Oh, that's terrible. Chase.
Too bad. I think we might hear what he was saying too.
I know. You know, Chase reminded me of something. To answer your question on a side note, Mike, because I'm always thinking of ways to try to say the dumb thing that I've done so that it can help somebody else not to suffer the stupidity. And I got a new iPhone, and I ended up going to the place where I got it. I got it from AT&T, and just wiping the whole hard drive. And then like 3 days later, remembered that I had recorded a bunch of mental melodies into it. I was like, shit. Oh. So good for me, because my memory sucks. I didn't remember that the software I use can upload, and I had uploaded it to the cloud service for that software. So I didn't actually lose any of it. I was very lucky. So, you know, I would just say to people, the software I use is called, let me find it. It's called Twisted Wave. I don't know if you can see that. No, you can't see it really. Anyway, it's called Twisted Wave, and you can upload to the cloud service, or you can upload it to a place where you can pull it down right away, and then it goes into Twisted Wave on your Mac. And so I would recommend using some sort of software that you can at least upload those ideas to and do them right after you got done doing it. I might have lost a couple. They must not have been that good if I can't remember. Let's see if we got Stable Chase. Stable Chase?
Can you hear us? He's kind of got a Max Headroom look to him.
Yeah, he does.
Kind of jittering around.
Well, Chase, sadly, I'm going to jump ahead. Just come on in when you, I don't know if you can tell up above, there's a little bit of an icon that shows you how many bars of connection you have. It's in the middle of your screen if you move your mouse. Yours might be a little low right now. So Mike, you were asking, oh yeah, so if I want to write in different styles, I absolutely sing it first. And I remember as a kid, I used to do it all the time. And it's kind of embarrassing to admit, but I would spend way too long in the bathroom because it was the only place where I had some privacy, and I would hum out songs all the time, just sitting on the side of the tub and just trying to get some ideas. And then I would go over to my bedroom where, of course, my parents would catch me in between and remind me that my room needed cleaned, or I had to do the lawn, or I had to, you know. So it was like this one like place. And in my memory, I have all these memories of just mentally singing all these tunes in the bathroom to try to come up with ideas, and then I go practice them as scales on a guitar. And to this day, I still do that. And I try to write because I don't want to sound like anybody else. It's the only way I can guarantee myself to come up with something that is somewhat original, is to just like I'm doing right now, just go, okay, I'm going to write a song, and then just start. And, you know, there's nothing there. Even though I've been playing Beatles for the past 2 weeks on the guitar, if I pick up a guitar and start doing it, then I'll end up just like automatically strumming like an old Beatles song or something. So to avoid that, I try to write always first in my head before I put it to anything. How about you?
Interesting. So you're trying to avoid what's sometimes called informally muscle memory from your guitar skills, which may be tied into existing artists or existing songs. So you step away from the guitar so that you don't inadvertently start replaying stuff that you're just familiar with, and you just launch yourself into the abstract realm of just singing and hearing things in your head.
And I stay away from the guitar too, because the minute I pick up a guitar, my hand goes into some sort of A chord formation, and I start playing an A every goddamn time, and it drives me crazy.
So Chase, are you back with us?
Yes, it seems like it's working copacetically now.
All right. You want to give us a replay of what you said earlier? It sounded really interesting, but we only heard about 10% of it.
Yeah, sure. So just to keep it brief in case I cut out again, I use the iPhone to record all the melodies before I enter out of my dreams or a car, and jumping over like that I had that what came to me off of the phone, and when I'm composition and they're rhythmic and melodic.
All right, I think we heard about 50% of that, but we can probably piece together the answer that you're using the iPhone is to catch musical ideas that came to you in your dreams, in your sleep, and that's kind of an archival tool for you, and that's been with you for a long time. And I think that's a really smart use of an iPhone.
Yeah. What about you, Mike?
This does happen to me sometimes, not always, but I often will hear a tune in my head, or much more often a rhythm or groove in my head, like if I'm doing battle music or something like that, I'll hear some kind of rhythmic impulse, and I will try to improvise it verbally, you know, even if I'm just going da 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 or whatever into the iPhone, because the spontaneity and energy at that moment tends to be very high. And you can kind of riff on a rhythmic idea. You can improvise some variations. You can just, through the free associational process, the act of humming out a rhythm or groove or something motoric will make you come up with segue ideas and B verses and contrasting ideas, even if you don't know harmonically what you're doing yet, or even melodically. So sometimes I'll try to record that because it's great to capture those ideas when they're fresh and impulsive. And then sometimes I'll even write down, I'll notate, I'll kind of, like I'm taking a theory test, I'll notate the rhythm of whatever I came up with, and then try to build a structure around that rhythmic core. And then do all the harmonies and the inner voices and all the vertical stuff and all the detail. But the impulse is born of a kind of mental, verbal improvisation. And I agree with Chase. It's great to have an iPhone to be able to capture that.
Do you, as you were asking, I was going to ask you, do you do rhythms first all the time? Or, because you'd mentioned melodies and then you said especially rhythms. Is rhythm like where your starting point is when you do that?
It really depends on the score. If it's action music, or it's battle music or something like that, where you're really trying to capture the energy of the moment, you might need to start with tempo and maybe meter and say, like, what is the skeleton of this cue rhythmically? How fast are things moving on the screen? As a player, how much adrenaline is going through my system? Is this kind of like a slow burn, or is this a big climactic, everything flying in my face kind of situation? So I might start with rhythm and tempo and meter, and that might be one of those mental improvisations. If it's something more thematic, story scene, a cutscene, or something from film, then I'm much more likely to start with a theme or harmonic progression and then spin out the other elements of the score from those compositionally.
Now, abstractly taking this to the next level, how much music do you end up recording just to get a little demo of, whether it's on your iPhone or not, and then turning it into a full piece later? On a percentage base, what would you say ideas or germs that get turned into full compositions?
Are you asking, like, what's the ratio of ideas that I come up with to ideas that get used in the project?
Yeah, any project, all projects.
Well, I don't really count, but so it's precise measurement is beyond my ken right now, but I would say probably I come up with like 5 times as many ideas as I use in a given project.
Gotcha. And you save those ideas, right, to come up with later?
Yeah, I'm bad about this. I almost always have a memo in my to-do manager saying, don't forget to listen to all your other ideas that you didn't use for this project and file it away, because I have a dim memory of thinking that was so cool at 2 a.m. And then not using that idea, but go get that was so cool idea, and then I always forget. And yeah, I'm bad about that. I should be better.
Chase, do you do the same thing? Do you have a bunch of demos that you've, I mean, that's the term I use for them. And how many do you turn into full pieces of music?
The project, to me, I've actually used all of them. I was actually doing a video. I was thinking of doing a video where it stemmed from, whether they be I've hummed and then sketched on the piano and then orchestrated and made it into a full track, or if like I haven't used all of the ones that I've recorded yet, but like I said, I just dumped those onto my computer, so I have access to them to do whatever I need to do and flesh them out, which is going to get that much more done.
Yeah, there's a good, I mean, a lot of prog bands did this, but Paul McCartney's probably my favorite to do it, is to take those unfinished pieces of music and try to wedge them into some other piece of music. Like if you listen to like Admiral Halsey from, I think it's Ram, from his second solo record, that's brilliant because right in the middle, or like A Day in the Life, the end of Sgt. Pepper's, you know, woke up, got out of bed. That's a great piece that he had written that he didn't have a beginning or an end for, which is great. And what I do when I record all of my demos, which if I were to answer that question, I would say like 0.5% of them turn into actual songs, because I'm constantly writing something and recording something. And I'll get to that. I think it's the next part of this question. It'd be interesting for everybody to get your answers on this. But but I always write down on paper, or I'll say on the recording what the opening chord is and what the ending chord is, so that later when I'm writing something and I go, oh man, this thing ends in F sharp, and there's got to be something I can put in here. I'll just go back to my list of how many pieces of crap I wrote that started in F sharp. And I do call them that. I have a playlist in iTunes called Super Junk. It's all of my like demos. And I'll just go, oh, here's like 8 F sharps. Let's see if any of these work. And then all you got to do is, what's really great about that exercise is I may have written it slow, but the song I'm trying to shoehorn it into is fast. And so I'll bring this piece, this new thing that I'm injecting up to tempo and go, oh, let's look at it from a different kind of tempo perspective, which is always pretty helpful, I think. And I'm not necessarily successful at it, but it's one of the tips that I use.
Now, you touched upon something, and I'll prod that and ask you to elaborate. Do you specifically use iTunes as your musical sketch filing system?
Dude, I have a box of cassette tapes right there from the 80s that's filled with musical ideas. I've got hard drives that are filled with musical ideas, external hard drives. And between that and Twisted Wave, which is really just my laziness, I should take the Twisted Wave stuff and import it into iTunes so I can have it in one place. The answer is mostly yes.
How do you deal with accumulating archives? Do you ever sit down between projects and say, it's time to go through my sketches and put aside the ones that are really good? And do you use like a rating system so that if you do something you think is really inspired, you can set it aside for later review?
Oh man, I want you to answer the same question. I'm mostly embarrassed by anything that I've written before 10 minutes ago. And so I really hate to listen back to the old stuff, especially anything that has lyrics, because it's me whining about an ex-girlfriend or something. It's always, that's the muse all the time, is some crap you're going through. And now that I'm a middle-aged man, when I look back on the 20-year-old Kyle and the whiny shit he was bitching about, I get embarrassed. So that makes it really difficult and really negatively colors that piece of music. So I mostly try to avoid any kind of music that has lyrics in it. And avoid. And then I go back and I listen to that stuff and I will star it in iTunes on how much I like it. And that also depends upon what the kind of musical culture is at the time. If I wrote something that was like, because I was listening to The Cure a lot and I wrote some Cure kind of thing, I'm not going to turn that into anything for another 5 years until The Cure comes around again or something, because music comes around. Not that The Cure ever went out of style, really, because they're still rocking it. But I kind of take that into account. I try to no lyrics because I don't want to just automatically hate the song, and then try to kind of keep it pertinent to what the musical environment is, and then I star it.
So do you have smart lists to show you all your 5-star sketches or something like that?
Well, no, but I can just search for that because I've got everything in that one playlist called Super Junk. Everything is in there.
Super Junk.
Hyphenated Super Junk. I often thought that would be the first, like my first album name. Anyway, I want you guys to answer that same question. I hate talking about me. So going with Chase first, because it sounds like we got a good connection right now. Chase, how do you organize your stuff?
My stuff.
Your demos. Uh-oh. Did I lie? Do we have a bad Chase connection? Mike, go ahead.
Okay. So like you, I use... Wait, is he back? Chase, we love you, but you're coming in and out.
Oh, Chase, I'm so sorry, man. It is so bad on our end. We're just hearing little bits and pieces, and it's super delayed. Yeah. Maybe, if you don't mind, maybe log off, like shut down the window, and then log back in and see if that cleans it up while Mike is approaching the question. Okay. Thanks.
A lot of pressure for me. And then there was 2. Okay, so like you, I do actually have some old cassettes of ideas from a zillion years ago, and occasionally I will digitize it, which I take as permission to not to have to listen to it because there's no pressure anymore. It doesn't matter if the cassettes disintegrate. That's probably happened already. But that extremely old historical archive notwithstanding, most of what I do is in iTunes. iTunes has it's a pretty good application for filing your musical ideas because the folder and playlist system is very flexible. It's Apple scriptable, which makes it very, very powerful. I have menus that let me automatically jump to certain playlists that might be several subfolders deep, but I can just pull up a menu and jump right there with a simple Apple script. So for navigation, whatever it can't do easily, it can be taught to do easily. The fact that you can put an audio item in more than one playlist is really important, because I have project-specific lists like ideas for this game, and then I'll have cool ideas that I might want to use someday. So I'll come up with an idea and I'll both drag it into the playlist for the current project and the cool ideas list. So you could not do that with the native file system on the Mac unless you used aliases or symlinks or something like that. So that's a really handy technique. Mostly the fact that you can script that thing makes it really useful.
Yeah.
I have sequestered what I call my musical sketch iTunes from what I call my commercial audio iTunes. So my iTunes install on my laptop has Apple Music. It has all my commercial music I'm listening to by other artists, etc. And the iTunes install on my production music Mac has nothing but my stuff. So I do not let those two intermix. So that way, if I'm searching for something, I'm not searching through my music collection. I used to have those assets mixed, and it was just a nightmare. So if you've got the multiple computers or some other way to sequester these two aspects of your iTunes life, I recommend that. I'm trying to spin this into some tips for people who might be listening, so it's not just my own biography.
No, please.
iTunes is pretty good. I use Audio Finder for masters. That's kind of a slightly different thing, but that's not sketches. That's the final product that I need to file away.
Audio Finders as in the same software I use for sound effects storage?
Yeah, exactly right.
Iced Audio?
Exactly. I find it's useful to have different silos for different things. So I like to keep my masters in one silo and my sketches in another, so I don't confuse the 24-bit WAV files that are the final end result of a project with all the transient MP3s of me singing or banging on the piano. I like to separate those things because they're very different.
That's great. But Chase, how are you feeling? How's your payphone connection going?
I actually switched to the hotspot. Hopefully it's not that long of a show next, so we'll see how I get through there. Is it better?
Yeah, it's fantastic now. Thanks, man. Sorry about the delays.
I'm sorry. I mean, unfortunately, I don't really have a direct connection yet. I'll try to brainstorm some things, but yeah, I don't have the fancy stuff that I think I was listening to you and Mike talk about. So I just use the normal Windows folders and have my own hierarchy of things that I learned from post-production houses that I worked at 10 years ago.
Nice. Well, what are some of those things you learned? Can you pass those on to, there's some tidbits?
Yeah, sure. So I guess like if I'm going to start a session in Cubase, I like to have the hierarchy of like the project folder being first. So whatever that project name is, project X, and then inside that folder, I create, it's called session files. And those session files will be everything that Cubase files that go into it in terms of like its proprietary naming conventions and audio and image files and so on and so forth. Then outside of that, so session files, only the project files and anything audio goes inside there. So if we go out of that folder, it should just be, session files. And then I'll make another one that says mix renders, and everything that I create in Cubase, I direct it to like temp stems or not stems, because I would make a different folder for that one. But if it's just like MP3 or wave bounces that I need to just reference, maybe on the laptop or on the phone or something, will go in that folder. And then when I finish, then I create a folder called final. And those are the final mixes that I have, and everything else that will be delivered to the client from there forward. And if I need to do sheet music, MIDI files, I'll name it MIDI files. And if I need to do stems, then it will be called stems. So I can see exactly where everything is in terms of getting to it directly rather than clicking through a bunch of folders saying, where is this?
I was on mute. That's fantastic news. It's funny that you said final, because it reminds me of a meme that just, I tried to look it up really quickly. It just took over the interwebs a couple of days ago. and it was like it showed how a musician names files, and it was like idea, and then under that it was like iteration 1, and then it was like final, and it was like final, and it was like the real final. It just,
Yeah, I have a few of those. Final with one.
Final V2.
final. It's so true. I don't know how many times I've said, it's kind of what's the term? I think it's called retronym, where a new name causes you to change the previous names. And I don't know how many times I've gone back and retronymed folders and said, no, that wasn't the final. That was just revision 18.
I have the worst habit with respect to the word new, because I'll have an idea and I'll save the files like, Q5 new. And I'll look back at it later and say, this has no semantic content. This is not useful. It just means it's a version I made after another version. I don't know if it's the last version or what. So I've tried to get out of that habit.
New.
I've done that too. It's terrible. I'll just it's like a new star. I'll keep appending different degrees of newness, which means I guess I have to figure out what's the maximum new version. So there's new, and then is there a new for version floating around somewhere? It's terrible. Never get in that habit. Just increment by numbers.
Yeah.
One final.
Yeah, good luck. Especially when you have clients, because then the client, it's final to you. And you've had a contract with the client. And it's like, I'm doing 3 revisions. So you're on the 3rd revision. You might as well name that folder final, because it's like, this is it.
Right. Just so you guys know.
And then they go, hey, can you make one small change? And you're like, oh, of course I can. But I got to charge you $400 to change the name of that folder, because I do nothing for under a half hour. And I'm $400 a half hour. I don't know about you guys. That is not true, of course. Jeez,
Okay.
For the people listening. I ruined my own business prospects by saying these ridiculous things online, thinking that people know how ridiculous they are. And then somebody will walk away. I can see it like on a Twitter feed. Kyle Johnson says he charges $400 for a half hour of work. I mean, I would if I could get away with it, wouldn't we all? But,
yeah,
but no.
As long as you don't mean like $400 per half hour of music.
Oh.
That'd be the opposite.
Oh my God, that's so painful. Okay, listen. We have a topic to move on to, and that one was super fun. That kind of moved all over the place and was still very focused. I really liked it. But we have, and I'm looking it up here, Jazz Aria had asked a question quite a while ago. I told him we'd get to it, and I'm glad he reminded me. Thank you. And this is a reminder to anybody who watches the show. Please tweet us. If I haven't DM'd you as the Game Audio Hour, say, hey, dude, DM me, and I will make sure to do that. And that way you can send us like private questions, and we can include them on the show, because this is something we've never covered. And I think it's really important, especially in today's education environment. Now, I'm going to paraphrase, but basically, and Chase has helped us here by putting some stuff in the thread, so I'm going to read from that. What do you think of the benefits/costs of online music degrees to an aspiring composer? Mike is and Chase are inspiring composers. What do you think about the benefit to cost of doing basically online music school for composers? And I assume, if I were to extrapolate this a little bit, specifically game audio, because I wouldn't be able to speak for movie or television composers. Mike would be able to speak more to that. But I don't know if any of us, maybe we should start out there. Have any of us done online education?
Yes.
No, not me either. Chase, what was your experience? And maybe we should start there with you and your opinion on this. And also we'll move into the other things, like how valuable is a formal education itself to somebody who has adequate motivation and resources to study on their own. There's some great sub questions in this.
Absolutely. So speaking on the first question, online education for me personally I'm not as disciplined. I tend to actually procrastinate, which is not something that I do often. I'm actually more of a proactivator than a procrastinator. But being online is like, oh, I'll just get it done later, and then I'll look up, and I would have missed the deadline for a project or for an assignment. And I'm not as focused. I'm not as attentive. And so I did it once, and I didn't do it again, because I just realized I just don't have that type of mindset, whereas I will be able to deliver what I need to deliver and actually learn. And
so you're saying
something well.
You're saying because the medium is the internet, it actually introduces procrastination into you're studying.
For me personally,
ordinarily it wouldn't, huh?
Right. And that's why I prefer, and I decided I would just go into a classroom and sit down, meet people, have, if I needed help, I could get help, within that, community, or, with among, classmates and such, and actually be just more engaged, and more questions would propagate, at least within my head, so that I could feel like I'm actually learning, because I'm stuck. I'm not stuck, but I'm set in a place where I have nothing else to do but learn the material, rather than look at my Wii U over here and like, oh, what's this? Or go on the internet and do something else. Now, mind you, people do that in classrooms, but that's not how I learn in classrooms. When I'm there, I'm taking notes, I'm sitting there, I'm attentive, I'm listening to the teacher, I'm asking questions, the whole 9 yards.
That's great, man. Yeah, I can definitely see the problem with that. I've never done any online stuff. Mike, have you, your education, was that Carnegie Mellon for you?
Yes, though not as much for music. That was kind of.
I was wondering if it was where you spent most of your. Was that well? Talk about your educational background, and then your opinions on online education.
Well, I started out studying something that had nothing to do with music, except in the most abstract sense. I was studying cognitive science, which was a lot of cognitive psychology and artificial intelligence. I had essentially a music minor on the side. Not officially, but I took courses that constituted that. And that was all in person, because that's what we had for learning back then. You went to a room with somebody who knew stuff and you listened while they talked. And that's my paradigm for learning. So like Chase, I sometimes find that anything online takes more effort. There isn't that peer pressure and social forces of having a professor stare at you. And it has a cognitive value. The fear, of being called upon, or the shame of drifting off and having somebody be like, excuse me, that stuff is useful as a cognitive tool. So I think if you're extremely motivated, you can learn stuff online. Sure, you just have to be really, really focused. You have to have a kind of metacognitive awareness of yourself. You have to know, okay, I'm going to drift off unless I am constantly refocusing on why I'm taking this course, because you don't have that shame of the professor, that sense of a human body in the room with you. I think it can be done. I've just never had both the opportunity, like they say in murder mysteries, I have never had the means, motive, and opportunity.
Yeah, well, online, if I had to give an opinion of myself about online, it's, again, I have no experience doing it. I've looked into it mostly to kind of refresh stuff that I learned in college. And I saw that Juilliard was offering a music theory course, and I'm a little bit weird that way. I love theory, and so I thought, well, let me kind of dig in again, because you'll learn this much, and then over time you funnel it down to like the things that you are useful, that are useful to you in your career, and it's very limiting. And I wish I had a wider kind of breadth of memory. Maybe I don't think as wide in theory as I should, and I start writing stuff that's very kind of not where I want to be. And I listen to other musicians and I go, oh my God, that jump that they just made there is brilliant. They went from the 1 to the 6, and I didn't expect that whatsoever. And so I love, and then I try to do it myself. And, so I saw on a Facebook ad that Juilliard was offering theory, and I thought, well, hey, it's Juilliard, it's theory. Let me sign up. And then I saw the price and I thought, nope.
What were they charging?
Well, I probably shouldn't say, because I am kind of speaking negatively about the price. And I don't want to discredit the people that are teaching this course. Imagine the professor that has to not only handle their, perhaps I'm assuming here, but not only do they have to handle their regular like face-to-face class load, they're now taking on this extra yoke of online teaching as well. And I know that they would only be teaching within a realm that they are already familiar with, so the kind of curriculum and the coursework is probably going to be very much the same. But now they've increased the number of tests they have to grade, if you will, and the people that they have to interact with. But that's another thing about online education, is I found it's very, like, teacher time or professor time is distant. It's not readily available. Like Mike described, you could literally get out of your seat, walk down the stairs, go to the front and ask a question. after the class. But here I got to send an email. I don't know when I'm going to get an answer. So there's part of me that thinks, I don't know, there's too many deterrents in there. I don't think that I'm pretty motivated guy when it comes to music. Like, don't ask me to do the lawn or anything, or paint a wall. But when it comes to music, I'm very motivated. And so the online thing doesn't scare me there, but I don't have any experience doing it online. So maybe I would find that I wasn't motivated, or that I had some, but the deterrents for me were right up front. Price was number one. Access to the professor was number two. And number three for me was, if I'm going to do projects with other students, I want to kind of be able to like be in the room and think about it. And this didn't really offer that. I'm going to give a number four. I'm also middle-aged, and I was going to be with a bunch of, I presume, younger students. And I don't want to shoehorn my experience into something, you know what I mean? Or feel like I should, or be leaned on for advice because I'm older, you know? It's like I might have the wrong advice completely. So that was the deterrent. And then I got to say, number five was a big one for me. Webcam. We do this show every week. I don't mind being on webcam, but with a bunch of strangers in a weird disjointed class formation, I don't really want to do that, you know? So I was like, can I cover the webcam? Can I put a Post-it note on it? Can I turn it off? What are the options for webcam, you know? Can I just walk away if I see some like conversation happening that I not only don't have anything to contribute to, I think it's going down a weird path, and I just kind of like, oh, you know, but maybe that's their accountability measure, is like webcam. You're here and you're looking at other students, and if you bring that conversation down, or if you show some disdain or boredom, you're hurting the whole class. You know, it seems so weird.
Well, that interests me because it seems like it may be an attempt to solve the motivation problem. Because if you're on a webcam and theoretically the teacher, I don't know what the interface is like on their end, but let's say it's like a James Bond villain with a whole bunch of little faces on the screen, like having 30 televisions stacked up on a wall in the 80s. Knowing that, at least in theory, someone could be looking at you through the webcam might give you a secondhand version of that motivation, because you're in the physical presence of someone.
Yeah.
In this case, simulated. But I feel like this is interesting, because I do realize I have taken one online course, and it wasn't really about game audio in any way. It was actually a lyric writing course. But the way they got around the problem of feeling disconnected was the professor would record voice memos evaluating my work, and then he would email me the recording of his voice. So there was a kind of personalization. And it did have a sense of accountability. Like, this professor is going to tell me what he thought of what I did, and I'm going to listen to his voice. And it's very different from receiving an email. You know, there's all this subtext and emotional connotation, and yes, occasionally the tone of disappointment. So I think methods like this, where they're trying to simulate some of the aspects of being in a room with someone, can be valuable in solving the motivation problem. So yeah, that's as informed as I get on this topic.
And also, I think, you know, there are some benefits that are immediately available. For instance, and I can work this into our sponsor, is there are tools that'll come with that online course. Now, if I go physically, if I want to go study, you know, theory at a reputable music school living near LA, I still got quite a drive to go do that. And here I can just do it online. And the benefits of driving to a class is that they're going to say, here's your coursework, here's some software from some companies that support what we're doing. But online, you're getting to that nice school, you're still getting the benefit of those tools. And, you know, there are a number that are good out there, and there's some great software tools that I don't know if they're tied to any classes right now, so I can't say that. But Isotope, who sponsors this show, does some amazing tools that you can use theory to compose, and you can certainly use mixer theory to improve your mixes with. And thank you for sponsoring the show, Isotope. It sounded too shoehorned, but I just didn't want to accuse Isotope of sponsoring schools, like go to Juilliard and you'll get a bunch of Isotope stuff. I don't know if that's the case. There are lots of softwares that is the case. and isotope is probably tied to number of colleges, but since I didn't look it up beforehand, I can't say that. So that's why it sounds so disjointed. But thank you, Isotope, for sponsoring the show as usual. And by the way, they're doing a major sale right now, so go out there and look at some awesome stuff. And next week we're doing another giveaway, so tune in next week. Unless our projects are heavy, but we'll try not to be. Even if it's just 2 people, we'll get on and do a giveaway next week. So back to that. What'd you guys for? Are you both out next week and I'm by myself? Hey, who knows? I mean, we've been busy as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Boy, guys, I got a migraine. I'm working my best way through it. So,
appreciate the effort.
Yeah, putting up the effort. And so that's what counts at Christmas. You know, there was that subject though at the end. I think we should finish out with, because we only got like 7 to 10 more minutes. And it was the larger topic. Let me find it here in the thing. I get back up to threads. It says here, how valuable is a formal education itself to somebody who has adequate motivation and resources to study on their own? What do you guys think?
Formal education, I assume you're talking like a 4-year degree or equivalent.
I assume the same thing, yeah.
It's a pretty broad question. I would say the more education you can get, that you approached with a very purposeful and motivated frame of mind, the better. It doesn't help if you drift through college not really paying attention and not feeling like the courses are tied to your future. But if you can really conceptualize a path of learning as a tool to your happiness, because this is going to let you do the stuff you want. Like you're in a plane in World War II and you've got a parachute and you're about to jump off, and a guy is giving you instructions on how to operate your parachute. You're going to be a very motivated learner because you're going to know there's a direct connection between this skill set and something important to you. In this case, your life. And if you could approach learning with that same focus and not be like, cool, man, it's music, this is a good time. You know, if you can really have that kind of intense focus, you know, as much education as you can get is invaluable, especially if it's in areas where you don't think you need to be educated. You can often be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, that's a great point. Chase, what do you think?
I'm sorry, the analogy is so.
He's still laughing about the parachute.
It's so intense. It's like it's your life, life or death right now for that education. You're jumping off the plane with that. Oh, that was great.
Unless you like to bounce. If you like bouncing, don't worry about the education.
It's funny. I was asked this question a long time ago off of a video that I did on my. It was a comment, and it's kind of. I agree with what Mike says. I think the only thing I would add on to that is if you are going to do the education, do your research and do your research to know exactly where you're going to go to get what you need to get and learn what you want to learn. If you do not do the research of where your focus is, maybe it being game audio or film music or other types of media writing, and you go to a school that doesn't offer that, I think you're going to find yourself being very disappointed. And I don't think anybody wants to be that. So if you are going to go to school to be, you know, to have a little bit more of an education and to build upon the skills and pull things from your well, all I can say is just do the research about the school that you're going to go to make sure that they're offering the stuff that you want to learn to help you get to that next level.
Chase brings up an amazingly important point, and this is much more true today than it was when I was in school, that schools have recognized that teaching film music or game music or medium music is a cash cow because so many people are interested in it, and these programs are popping up everywhere. And that doesn't mean that they're taught by people who have insight into the subject matter beyond what you yourself might know in a year. So Chase made such a great point. You know, find out as much as you can about the prospective course or school or teachers and make sure it's the real deal.
Oh my goodness. You guys have hit on something that I'm going to get on my soapbox about. I apologize. So mute me now.
Let's do it.
Get my popcorn.
God, it is near and dear to my heart. And sadly, the world accepts it too easily. And it is being educated by people who aren't educated themselves. I have been misled so many times. And there's a particular moment in my life where I was very naive out in the Midwest, moved to LA, had some roommates, had some people I was hanging out with, and there was this one person who had an answer every time I had a question. And because I was naive, I believed that he was educated. And then I went and said this thing, whatever it was. You know, I may have said the sky is blue, and he'd say, oh, it's actually a weird hue of purple that nobody really talks about. And I go to a party and I go, you know, the sky is this weird hue of purple. And I'm talking to a guy who actually created the sky and he knows better. It was that kind of ridiculousness. And I was just made a mockery of. And it affected me so deeply that to this day, anytime I'm going to be educated, I vet who the educator is. I look up their biography. I try to figure out what their education is. And sadly, and this is some dangerous area, there are conventions around that need to get speakers on stage, and anybody can apply to be a speaker. And I certainly hope that the people who vet those topics are vetting also the education and the merit of the person who's doing the speaking, because I don't believe that it is healthy for a room of 20,000 people, or, you know, maybe not that much, 5,000 people, to be educated in a negative way. You know, that helps the career of the person who's on the stage, who might not actually have maintained, or at least up until now have done well for themselves. They want to do well for themselves, and they see this opportunity as a way to kind of market themselves as a person who's an expert in this area. It happens across everything, not just games, not game audio. It happens in all kinds of educational spaces. You know, you think about online things like TED Talks and stuff. You know, you wonder, how qualified is that person? And typically, to be fair, they are qualified and they are being vetted and they're up there for a reason, but it doesn't stop me from wondering. And I recently was in a situation where it was highly suggested to me by a friend to listen to the talk of this person who had written a book that the friend liked. And I said, well, what's the education? You know, and the education ended up being of this person who was doing the talk, that they had a business and they had experienced these things. And I said, no, thanks. I'm all right. Because there are millions of people who have businesses and have experienced these things. And I would rather have some sort of concrete information fill my head than just the opinions of somebody. Now, I'm not looking for a safe room. I did end up listening to the talk, but I listened to the talk with a grain of salt, going, I don't know how much of this I'm going to take, you know? And if it's like, if somebody says, hey, we're going to talk about the theory of relativity, and I go, who are you going to get? And they say, Einstein. Somehow he's back, you know? I'm like, I'm there. I'm there for a couple of reasons, but I'm definitely there for the see a dead man walking. But, you know, but if they say, you know, Einstein's third cousin removed, who is not, you know, I could have read those books and gotten the same thing from them. So I don't know. Time is money, and I want that time to be spent in an educational space, being educated by people who I feel are actually in a position to give out that information. And what's great about colleges is they've vetted that. You know, they're bringing people onto the campus to talk about things, and those people usually have had some sort of, you know, history with this topic. Not just, oh, I had a business and this is what my experience was. I don't know. I'm not that interested. You know, and how successful is your business? That's the thing in that case, is like, if Richard Branson's going to show up and talk about his opinion of something, I'm there. But if Joe McJohnson shows up and I've never heard of him, I'm like, I don't know. You know, how successful was your business? How important is this information? And how much am I helping you to further your career rather than helping me to further my education? That's a big question for me. And so I think it is extremely important to vet where you're getting this education from, how useful it's going to be to you, how important and how educated are the people that are giving it to you. That is absolutely important. That was my soapbox, was how important that is.
I think it was all well said, and other than the part about meeting the guy who had created the sky, it was all easy to understand. I think between us, we've made 3 of the worst allegories the show has ever had. But yeah, no, I think you're making an excellent point. You need to know that the ladder you're climbing is leaning against the right wall.
Yeah. And that's a great way to put it. But you know what's funny is that societally, people are starting to look down upon you vetting somebody. That's the point of my whole story, is that when I said, I don't know, I'm okay, I got some pushback. And the reason I got pushback was because the person who wanted me to go see it likes that person. Rather than they're saying, oh my God, this is the expert in the space and you need to take this in. You'll love it. You'll be enlightened. It was more like, this is my favorite football team. Why aren't you watching them on television? I go, well, that's all right. It's not my favorite football team, or I've never heard of them. It's from the Canadian Football League. How the hell am I supposed to know they exist? Sorry, Canada. Oh, by the way, happy Canada Day. Hey, listen. Oh, yeah.
Bravo.
I grew up half my life in Canada. I'm honorary at this point. Speaking of Labatt, please start importing Labatt 50 to the United States. I've waited long enough. That's a side note. But that is so important. And the fact that the world is starting to look down upon you for wanting to know. And there's another part of this is, that person may have embodied the education for far enough that the person who wants you to go see it is satisfied. But maybe for you, you need a little bit more. And that's okay. That's okay. The person with a little bit more is out there. And just the simple fact of going out to find that person, you're going to educate yourself on the way. Because you're going to start looking at books, and you're going to start looking at online papers, and you're going to start asking your friends about things. And they're going to start telling you, little idioms that exist within that education. And you're going to take that in. You're going to soak it in. And by the time you find that person, is going to educate you. That Luke Skywalker is going to teach you how to use a lightsaber. You're going to actually already know
stick to
lightsabers.
Stick to what you know.
That's right. I went for it. I went for it because I love torturing my Star Wars friends with my lack of Star Wars knowledge. But ultimately, trust your instincts, right, when it comes to being educated. And the last part of this, which I have soaked up enough of the oxygen in this conversation, but I do want to finish off by approaching the actual something useful from the question about, is a formal education itself. In my experience in the game industry, and if I had to guess, I would say it is less than 50% of the people that I work with that have an education in the thing that they do. And I would say a little bit above 50% of the people in the game industry that I work with have an education in games in general. Like I studied in college psychology and music, and I am not a psychologist. So there's a lot of people out there who their major wasn't what they end up doing as a career, I'd say, and especially in the game industry, that's less than 50% in my experience, but have studied some sort of something in the game industry. Maybe they studied design, or maybe a better example is they studied programming with a focus on games or an intention to go into games, but they're now a game designer. So they still studied something that relates to the game industry, but they're actually not doing that thing. I think that's a little above 50% of the people in my experience. So with that being said, I know plenty of game designers who haven't even gone to college and still design great levels, great games, but they worked their butts off. They found a way in. Commonly, I find that way in is usually through QA, and they work really hard at QA because QA can kill your interest in games playing the same level over and over and over. So the stamina just to be in the game industry as a QA person, I bow to thee because it's amazing. And they went through that minefield, stood out, learned whatever it is they wanted to move into after QA while they were in that minefield, and waded through many rejections to finally get accepted into the team of game designers, if you will, in this example. And they're designing games, and they're doing a fantastic job. And they have zero post-high school education, formal education. That's what I say about formal education.
So it sounds like the consensus is maybe. It may help you.
Yeah.
I think where the formal education is very useful is when it comes to issues like music theory, orchestration, composition. Having those skills under your belt is very helpful. Not essential, but can give you a leg up, can be of use in approaching different styles. And that's a very kind of ivory tower body of knowledge in a lot of ways, as opposed to studying game technologies, which is kind of a young field and not well defined. In those areas, I recommend whatever education you have time and money for, but don't let it stop you if you don't have access to it.
And certainly don't avoid education because you think that you'll learn it all on your own. You will learn a lot of it on your own. And then when you're 80 and you're ready to go for your first game job, you know what I mean? Because that's what happens is we learn these things naturally over time through our associations with people, our interests, and our, you know, YouTube videos or whatever. And by the way, there are great online tools for education. And there are some people who believe that formal education is starting to wane and online education is starting to grow. LinkedIn being one of them, actually. You know, they don't, I'm not going to suggest that they think that formal education is important, but they see a future in online education. And so, but the point is that you're going to learn a lot on your own, but the true musician never is done learning until they're dead and they just don't have a choice. Mike, you brought something up though I wanted to say before we closed out, and but I got distracted by my thought about online learning. Dang it. Can you remind me just a couple of words of what you had just said?
Kyle, that was like 3 minutes ago.
I know.
I have no idea.
We're in the same age group.
I think I was talking about the usefulness of learning music theory or composition, kind of the old school music creation body of knowledge. I think that is valuable if you have time and access to it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I can't remember what it was I was going to say about that, but you're absolutely right. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Mike and I have worked together quite a few times, and Mike is amazingly talented and very kind and being patient for my conversions in my brain. As a guitar player, and I know there are other instruments that do this, it's like switching from PC to Mac back and forth constantly when you're working with a pianist, because I have such a thing as A sharp, and Mike does not. He has B flat. And so, you know, your instrument will determine, and Chase, I'm sure you've got the B flat as well. And oftentimes, and it depends on how this is handled. This is amazing, you know. So Mike will say, hey, I need you to play that B flat. And then I swear to you, I pause. And I go, oh yeah, that's A sharp. And Mike will say, well, no, yes, it's A sharp. That's what Mike will say. Other people I've worked with will go, no, it's B flat. And I'll say, no, it's A sharp. And they'll go, no, it's B flat. As if their instrument is somehow superior to my instrument. And therefore their structure is, you know, and so, you know, remember that whatever it is you're learning, whatever instrument is your pathway into this education, it's going to teach you some stuff that does not directly correspond to another instrument. And it's important to reach out of that and to learn as much as you can about the education of the other instruments, especially in this game world. You know, learn as much orchestral kind of nomenclature and processes as you can, even though you're a rock guitarist, because you're gonna feel, you know, insecure when you're working on a project with somebody who's got some kind of education like Chase and Mike does, and you're like, oh, I'm looking for that B flat, but I can't find it, and you're like, oh shit, that's A sharp. I'm being an idiot. My favorite is. Oh, go ahead.
I remember I have a friend who's really talented with theory and went to the same program that I did, and he had to do a project. He was rescoring Kubo and the two strings, and that instrument is like a shamisen. And so he figured out that the banjo has the same type of texture and timbre for it. So he just restrung the banjo in the sense to just make it sound close to the shamisen, and then recorded it. And that's where formal theory will get you, yeah. if you know it. But yeah, he was pretty talented with that, to be able to understand the instruments and its key, and understand like what the strings are, and I thought it was really impressive.
Yeah, that's absolutely. So education plays a role there, whether you get it formally or informally. To know that stuff so that you can communicate with everybody else is important. All right, guys, I'm going to take off. Call it a good show. Great topic. Spirited. I wanted to keep going, but I have to stop because it's been over an hour.
It's not the game audio hour and a half.
I'm pushing it now. I've noticed when I look at the rundown of times, it's like an hour and 7 minutes, an hour and 8 minutes. Like I'm growing. The game audio hour and 10 minutes.
So is there any social media items you'd like to divulge?
You know, there are some things There are some things, definitely. There's the tweeting on the Twitter. There is the liking us on Facebook. There is the subscribing to us on YouTube. I need one of those YouTube pillows just to kind of sit in the background that you see on other YouTube videos. Yeah, please do all those things. We really appreciate it. But most importantly, and I joke about that stuff because I'm not very good at social media. These other two guys you're looking at are. But well, yeah, you're one of them, mister. I love how you put out scores. Like I go, oh, I get to listen to something new from Mike. It's fantastic. I love that. And Chase is all over Twitter, teaching me last week even about Twitter. But the one thing I was going to say about social media is please do connect to us on a direct message kind of basis. I look at everything that comes through and we will bring up your subjects that you want to cover, because really the show is for you. You know, it's us who have a modicum of experience, some more than others. There are 3 people that you should listen to and 1 you shouldn't, named Kyle. And you should definitely DM so that I can get the opinions of these brilliant people onto the camera for you and for other people to watch. There you go. That's my best. That's all I got, guys.
No but.
Well,
perhaps it is time to wrap this wonderful episode so that we leave some material for next time.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you, Mike. Have fun. I know you've been working your butt off, Chase, as well. I'll see you all next week, and please do all those things. Bye.
See ya.